So next in our area, we're going to stick in that same sort of theme. We'll be in southern Africa and also focused on the mesocarnivores, the middle-sized carnivores. We're going to be meeting with and hearing from people from the Cheetah Conservation Botswana. Specifically, the founder and director of Cheetah Conservation Botswana, Rebecca Klein, and Jane Horgan, who is the director, the engagement and awareness coordinator. And the two of them will speak to us from Botswana about supporting communities with coexistence through cheetah conservation in the Western Kalahari of Botswana.
Hello everyone, my name is Rebecca Klein and I'm the Executive Director of Cheetah Conservation Botswana. It's wonderful to join you all here today with the Living Desert. I'm the founder of CCB and I was lucky enough to come to Botswana in 2001 to work in a reserve called Mokolodi Nature Reserve. And here I met two cheetah brothers. And the mother was killed by a livestock farmer. And so they had been hand raised and they were incredibly beautiful cats. And I cared for them every day and actually fell in love with the species. I looked around to see how we could link up with some field organizations that were conserving cheetahs. But I was surprised to find that no concerted efforts were going on, and I thought, well, here's my opportunity to make a difference. My mission was assured. And of course, cheetahs really do need our help due to habitat loss, declining prey populations, and increasing human-wildlife conflict. Over the last 100 years, cheetah populations have declined 90% from around 100,000 to now less than 7,000 cheetahs left today. They exist in only 23% of the area where they used to roam, and Botswana is really at the center of the southern African population, and we have 2,000 cheetahs left today. So we really do have a big responsibility to the species to conserve cheetahs for the world as well as for Botswana. Now, so simply adapted for speed, these medium-sized carnivores, they don't do incredibly well in protected areas where there's a lot of lions and spotted hyenas. And 80% of Botswana's cheetahs are found outside of protected areas. And of course, here they have to live together with human populations, most of which in Botswana are livestock farming populations. And people's perceptions towards living with large carnivores has not often been very positive, and the occasional livestock loss to carnivores will mean that retaliatory killings are having a huge impact on their populations. As well as this, they often have to live in fairly bush-encroached environments, and they don't get up to the speeds that they need to sprint and catch their prey, but they've adapted very well to these environments. So we really wanted to ensure with cheetah conservation in Botswana that we can support these cheetah populations living outside of the protected areas in these key strategic areas for the maintenance of the population. And this is what Cheetah Conservation in Botswana was set up to do. We want to maintain Botswana's cheetah populations, large carnivore populations, in harmony with the communities as well, and seeing them at the very center of the conservation efforts. So we promote the coexistence of people and carnivores through a holistic array of activities, including community outreach, education programs, and research. And we do that with a fantastic team of predominantly local people. And we are based on a sustainably run livestock farm in the Western Kalahari, where we can demonstrate to farming communities that you can farm sustainably in the Kalahari and live in coexistence with wildlife as well. It's an incredibly remote area, as you can see from this video, huge expanses of wildlands left today. And we are one of the largest areas left south of the Sahara Desert. As you can see from the Human Footprint Index, you can see down where Botswana is highlighted. It's one of the least human impacted environments left in Africa. And these low human populations that we have mean that we have some of the strongholds for cheetahs, for wild dogs, brown hyenas, African lions as well. And we're also home to the amazing Kalahari sand bushman. who have this incredible knowledge of wildlife species. And this is where we've entered into our largest effort into landscape level conservation. Cheetahs are wide-ranging animals. They need large areas to survive. And so we need to do conservation land use planning over multiple land uses, and predominantly outside of the protected areas. And we were, in most of the books, when cheetahs are found in this Western Kalahari region where the white circle's highlighting, and that's where most of our work happens as well. And over the last 12 months, we were engaged by the United Nations Development Programme to create a human-wildlife coexistence strategy together with the communities. So with participatory planning, we would work together with communities and other stakeholders to improve the wildlife monitoring, reduce human-wildlife conflict, develop cultural tourism initiatives that would bring value to Indigenous knowledge, ecotourism initiatives to highlight those beautiful landscape features throughout the region, and also to bring value to a lot of this ancient knowledge, these Indigenous skills that the communities have, such as amazing knowledge of the veld products, the traditional medicines, and the crafts as well, all to support communities to live together with wildlife. So, and to see value in living with cheetahs, other carnivores in these beautiful wildlife spaces. Ensure that there is a future for the cheetahs in the Western Kalahari. Our research that's ongoing has contributed a lot to this and will continue to do so as we do more and more wildlife monitoring in the Western Kalahari. We do spore surveys on the sandy roads, which tell us where cheetahs are and where the other carnivores, other wildlife as well. We do this together with the local communities with the incredible sound trackers who have this innate knowledge of the landscape. We use camera traps to monitor the cheetah populations and other carnivores throughout the region. This has given us a huge insight into how these animals interact with other carnivores, with each other, how they move on farmlands, etc. All of this information we can give back to the communities. We do use satellite collars as well, so we can understand better the land uses the cheetahs are favouring, their home ranges, etc., all to help us understand the conservation needs. And of course, we have to understand the communities as well. So we do a lot of questionnaire surveys to look at livestock farming practices, livelihoods, perceptions towards living with wildlife. And this is, in fact, where the Living Desert became very, very supportive over last November when they held a 5-day-long social science workshop for all of the stakeholders working in this incredible region, so that we can be unified in the way that we do questionnaire surveys, in the way that we do social science, and all of this information that all of the different stakeholders are collecting will then feed into the human-wildlife coexistence strategy that we have been developing. And as an organisation, one of our primary focuses has always been to reduce human-wildlife conflict, and working with the farming communities, doing direct site visits to support them, workshops all over in the villages, at the boreholes, or at our own farm as well, to provide tools of how to live together with cheetahs and other carnivores, and how to improve your farming operations as well, so that you can be productive as possible with as minimal losses as possible, and therefore you can be in coexistence. One of the primary ways that we've found that's really, really effective is the use of livestock guarding dogs, and we promote the use of these incredible local breed Botswana dog, which is very, very cost effective and completely adapted to the environment. We take unwanted puppies from the villages and also from animal shelters, and they're brought to our livestock demonstration farm, where our herders and the other livestock guarding dogs as well teach them to be livestock guardians. And then we place them out with farmers in need, farmers that are having high levels of cheetah conflict. And it can reduce losses from 75 to 100%, and it improves the tolerance of people by about 70% on average, which is huge. And people are now willing to live together with cheetahs and other carnivores that couldn't manage it before. But the challenge is that we need a lot more lives and guarding dogs than we can actually produce. So this year, one of our first adaptations was really reaching out to our incredible farmers network. We bring farmers together to share information, to share successes and failures, and have that peer-to-peer learning. And we've got some incredible active farmers who are doing amazing responsible work, and those are our model farmers. We reached out to our model farmers and asked them if they would consider training livestock guarding dogs themselves for their own communities. And we were really excited that 4 model farmers came forward to agree that they would absolutely love to do this. So this has been fantastic. And this is our first model farmer, Jeffrey Moyer. He has started training livestock guarding dogs at his farm this year. He was having terrible trouble with cheetahs about 3 years ago. He reached out to us. He had lost 20 goats. He couldn't live with them anymore, basically. His livelihood was being too severely impacted. We gave him 2 livestock guarding dogs, and his losses went down to 0. Being able to diversify has meant that Jeffrey has resilience during troubled times. And during our corona lockdown in April and May, which was very, very strict, successful diversified farming operations like Jeffrey's were one of the few rural Botswana to continue to have a reliable income. And of course, this year has brought incredible challenges. And like the cheetah, we've had to be very adaptable and resilient, both our teams and the communities themselves. Luckily, COVID infection rates were still low, and by June, we could get back to most of our activities. However, schools were still closed to us. We weren't able to access the schools. And we also had to start thinking about how we were going to support our communities to continue to remain safe, especially now everybody was moving around. And so now I'm going to be joined by our engagement and awareness coordinator, Jane Horgan, for an update on all of that. Thank you, Jane.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jane Horgan. I'm the engagement and awareness coordinator for Cheetah Conservation Botswana. So our engagement and awareness team is responsible for a whole bunch of activities, everything from me going to schools and flailing my arms around in the air like that, to visiting schools with resources about wildlife conservation, especially cheetahs, to activities and competitions that we run with schools, and our, of course, environmental bush camps, which is one of our flagship programs. As our engagement and awareness team, we're also involved in awareness raising for the general public, so all of our PR stuff, annual reports, website, social media, as well as engaging with key stakeholders like the Botswana government and our farmers. So that all is part of our engagement and awareness program. But a lot of these activities, especially the education part, like you can see here, involves big groups and a lot of close contact. So you can imagine that this year has been a pretty tough one for us. In terms of the work that Cheetah Conservation Botswana is doing, I think our education team has been the one that's been most affected by the COVID restrictions and protocols regarding, keeping distance and stuff like that. So we've really had to pivot this year in order for us to continue passing on our messages of conservation to school kids. But it hasn't been easy. One of the things we did this year that was really cool was that we initiated an online art competition with students in Botswana. So we asked kids in Botswana to illustrate scenes from a new storybook that we did entitled Kabe, the Cheetah Hero. And it was really great because we got submissions from all around the country, and those artworks will go into the book that will be published and distributed in schools starting on International Cheetah Day, which is the 4th of December. So we're very excited about that. One of our other exciting programs this year was our Learn to Play playgroup, which was launched in the village of Kakai. We've never before done something like this, so we partnered with early childhood experts from Haberoni to develop an environmentally focused curriculum for this village. These guys, the village themselves had highlighted a need for early childhood education in the village. It wasn't available to a large number of kids there. And so we set about targeting that. And the great thing about the Learn to Play program is that women, mothers from the community themselves, are trained in how to deliver the curriculum. and they run the playgroup themselves. So it's not only providing early childhood education for the kids, it also is providing income and business experience for these mamas at the same time. Of course, the program was only running for 2 months. It started in February and then was shut down at the start of April when lockdowns in Botswana were enacted. So that, put a bit of a spanner in the works. Thankfully, our partners in GABS were able to adapt the curriculum and create play packs that the mamas could actually take once the really strict lockdowns were lifted. But the schools were still not allowed to open. So the mamas would go to the students' houses and perform home visits and do classes with them in their own homes, which was great because then their little kids, their little brains could continue to develop even though they were stuck at home. We couldn't open the classroom. But thankfully, by the time August came around, they allowed us to reopen the playgroup with very strict hygiene and cleaning protocols, as you can imagine. But the kids were very, very happy to get back into their classroom. And so were the mamas as well. So our Learn to Play education program is part of our newest department in Cheetah Conservation Botswana, our newest project, which is called Communities for Conservation. And this project looks at empowering local communities to create wildlife-based economies so that they can have a really direct benefit from conserving wildlife. And we've been working with these communities intensively now for quite a few years. Initially, a lot of the work was talking with the communities, having a lot of workshops with the communities so that they can identify themselves, what their challenges were, and where they wanted to go. We really wanted this program to be a bottom-up approach to community-based conservation. And one of the things that they highlighted that they really, really wanted was to preserve their unique and, threatened culture. The beautiful and incredibly knowledgeable culture that they have about how to live in the Kalahari environment, survive in the Kalahari environment, the traditional medicines, all of these things, that knowledge is going extinct. And then it's not being passed down through the generations like it used to be. And so we're looking at helping them to be able to conserve that knowledge. And so this photo is a photo of his nickname is Pro. I can't pronounce his name. It's beautifully complicated and has a lot of clicks in it. Pro is a master tracker. So tracking wildlife is one of the incredible skills that the Bushmen have traditionally. And so he's teaching kids from our educational bush camps on how to learn how to track properly, which was really a beautiful experience. So we're looking at different ways in which we can help facilitate the passing down of this knowledge, and this was one of the ways we did that. Also, helping them to build economies out of their incredible natural and cultural resources. So we're linking with key stakeholders in the area, as well as doing a lot of capacity building. But during the COVID lockdowns, one of the things we did was we tried to pivot so that we could help support these communities during lockdown and during this pandemic. So one of the things that they consistently got back to us was that they didn't have masks. These guys are in really, really isolated places. They're quite impoverished communities, and they didn't have masks for everyone in the villages. But also they didn't have, things that we really take for granted, like soap. They didn't have water in some places. How are you supposed to clean your hands when you don't have water? And also they didn't have information. These guys don't have TV. They don't have internet. They don't have newspapers delivered to their door. They're in the middle of the Kalahari. So we went about targeting all of those things, including creating these cheetah-themed hygiene posters that we translated into the local languages for them. And in terms of getting masks, we obviously wanted to source the masks locally. So what we did was we engaged with 3 different sewing groups. And one of them was led by Verity here. Verity is the lead mamapreneur from our Learn to Play Early Childhood Development Program that I mentioned before. And Verity stepped up and made the 630 masks that we needed to provide all of the people in her home village of Kakai. And through this order, she was using this machine, which is, a traditional machine that she had adapted with the hand crank so that she could use it without electricity, which was just phenomenal. And then with this one order, she actually earned more than a year's salary with this one order that only took her about 3 weeks to produce. So with that money, she actually installed a tap in her yard, which was the only water source in their entire property. And she'd been wanting to get that for years but couldn't afford it. So with that money, she installed the water, and then with the rest of the money, she's hoping to open a tuck shop so that she can have her own business moving forward and can make her own money. So in terms of what this meant for Verity, it was actually this one order that we made with her. It could be a real life changer. And it wasn't just her. We actually commissioned 2,600 masks, which were enough for our 4 target villages of Bere, Kakai, East Tanahai, and West Tanahai. And to make those masks, we worked with 3 different sewing groups. So it wasn't just Verity, his life was changed by this, great order. Actually, we managed to help quite a few people to in a time when there wasn't work around and there wasn't money around. So we were really happy to be able to do that. That's it for me for now, guys. I'll see you in the question and answer session, but for now, it's back to Rebecca.
So we have certainly learned this year that the key to resilience is adaptability, and we're really proud of the way our teams have managed to adapt to this new normal. And with protocols in place, we're able to continue our work, continue our community engagement for the human-wildlife coexistence strategy with our socially distanced meetings, everyone wearing the masks that our communities have so wonderfully provided. Our model farmers are busy training livestock guarding dogs and placing them out with their communities, and they are all doing incredibly well so far. The research team is back out in the field, and they're starting the largest camera trap survey that has been done outside of protected areas in southern Africa. And in case lockdowns happen again, we are training more and more farmers to actually check their own camera traps, so that we won't have a loss of data if we do get grounded. Our Farming for Conservation team is taking the information and the tools for sustainable livestock farming on the road from cattle post to cattle post, so we don't have to bring large numbers of farmers together. Learn to Play preschool has been able to open up again after following the government guidelines and being given the okay to go ahead. Our livestock guarding dog program is going from strength to strength, and we now have 67 dogs placed out in the Western Kalahari who are doing an incredible job at keeping their livestock safe and ensuring that cheetahs and people can coexist. We have certainly discovered over the years that cheetahs are more resilient and adaptable than often given credit for, living in often quite bush-encroached areas and living together with human communities is very challenging, and you have to be adaptable and resilient. So if this incredible species can manage to survive with all of these threats and all of these challenges, then we're sure that humans can do the same in light of all of the issues going on in the world today. And we want to say from all of us at Cheetah Conservation Botswana that we could not do it without you, our supporters around the world, especially the Living Desert, who has been a long-term supporter of ours in very significant ways, from both a funding perspective and also capacity building perspective, and also coming out to share their knowledge and expertise with our stakeholders, with our communities, and with our conservation practitioners. So we want to say a huge thank you from all of us at Cheetah Conservation Botswana, from our communities and from the cheetahs. Together we can create a sustainable future for the beautiful Western Kalahari. And in Setswana, I would like to say, Leleboha Tata. We thank you so much.
Well, kia leboha, Rebecca. Your all's work is just fantastic. And remains an inspiration to us every time we get to hear from you. And I think now joining us live from both England and Botswana are, thanks to the wonders of technology, Rebecca and Jane. Are you both here?
Yes, I think so.
All right.
Looks that way. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you as well. That's really fantastic. Thanks for going over and above to try to make certain that you can be a part of this as well with all of your travels around the world. We have several questions in here that we'd like to share with you. We had one question about the livestock guarding dogs, and I guess this is more for you, Rebecca, first. How exactly do the dogs protect the livestock? Do they chase the predators away?
Yes, well, we use the Swana breed of dog, and they're a very protective species. They're very effective for guard dogs as well. You know, that's how people sort of traditionally use them, as in their homesteads. And you know, you place the puppy in with the goats and sheep at 8 weeks old, so that they bond very strongly with the small stock. And then when they're out in the veld, basically when they're out in the bush grazing throughout the day, the livestock guarding dogs will protect the goats and sheep from any danger, from predators and also human thieves as well, because theft is a big problem for livestock farmers. And they're very protective, so they'll front up to any danger, and they'll bark and they'll be aggressive and they'll do the usual sort of scary things that dogs do, growling, showing teeth, etc. We haven't had reports of livestock guarding dogs actually attacking predators or chasing game to a large extent. Occasionally when they're puppies, they can be a bit playful, and there's reports of them chasing game. But if well trained, no, they won't chase the wildlife. They'll basically just stand in front and be protective. And then the small stock will be behind them. And of course, carnivores, cheetahs, other carnivores, they're opportunistic. They want an easy meal, you know, they don't want to fight. So 9 times out of 10, the danger will go the opposite way and find food elsewhere.
Fantastic. And it is so amazing that you're using dogs from the street, dogs that would probably otherwise have a short and rather brutal life, to be able to bring into this situation. Is there a limitation on the breeds that you use to do the livestock guarding dogs, or is it really just any kind of Botswana street dog that you can encounter?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different breeds can make good livestock guardians, and obviously around the world they've bred and selected. You know, there's the well-known Anatolian Shepherd dogs, which are brilliant guardians. The great thing about the Botswana dogs is that they are perfectly evolved for the environment. So, you know, sort of new research and sort of common thinking around livestock guarding dogs is tending to go towards those dogs that they kind of term the landrace dogs, those dogs that the environment has evolved. You know, because for the climate, for the diseases which are around, for the food that they traditionally get fed, you know, for local people, subsistence farmers, they can't afford, you know, expensive dog food and lots of veterinary care. So those locally produced dogs, those ethnic dogs, those indigenous dogs, are the most hardy for the environment, and they're freely available as well, because as you say, you know, they are often street dogs, often feral dogs. They don't necessarily have homes. And I think one humane society did a study, and they found that only about 30% of dogs in the villages and on the streets will actually make it to 1 year old. So it's wonderful to give a lot of those dogs a second chance at life from either the villages or the shelters. It's a win-win, and they become protectors of, you know, for cheetahs and other carnivores, and for the people that own them. You know, their livelihoods improve no end, because they no longer have all of those losses, and also all the time that they spent herding before now can be spent on other things. Like Jeffrey Moyo, he was able to diversify his livestock operations and start crops and chickens as well, you know, so that he has a more resilient livelihood. So they really are a fantastic tool.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rebecca. Jane, a question for you we received. It seems like the education and engagement is not necessarily directly focused calling out cheetah conservation specifically, but rather education and environment, or education and engagement in general. How do you tie in cheetah conservation to that kind of a program?
Yeah, well, hi, James. It's so great to see you. And hi, everyone that's joining us today. Yeah, I mean, similar to what Greg said, you know, he said that, you know, he's painted dogs but he's not. We use cheetahs in the same way as sort of a flagship species. So although cheetahs are our favorites, we are working to sort of, change perceptions and create kids that they're going to be, ambassadors for the whole environment, and cheetahs included in that. So, in order to understand why it's important to conserve cheetahs, they first need to understand the concept of ecology, and they need to understand how we're all connected in that circle of life, and how if you harm a cheetah, then you're harming yourself. And, if you eat too much bushmeat, then there's nothing for the cheetahs to eat, and they're going to start trying to eat your goats. And, we're all connected in this circle of life. So we sort of go about it in that way.
That totally makes sense. Absolutely. So it seems like because the work that you're doing is so multifaceted, right? With the human wild coexistence as the overarching frame, it seems like the folks in the field really have to be skilled at everything, training dogs, learning how to herd, learning how to do the education. Do you have, among the amazing staff who I've had the great fortune to get to know a bit in the field during the workshop, do they specialize on different parts, or are they trying to, or are they able to do all of the components, the education, the working with dogs, working with the communities, working with the education, stakeholder outreach things?
Yeah,
Rebecca,
well,
do you want to take
do. We do. They do specialize, yeah. So we have 4 main programs, and that is we've got the research program. So basically, we have a research coordinator, research officers within that. We then have the Farming for Conservation program, which specializes on the farmer training workshops, the model farmers, the farmers networks, the livestock guarding dogs. And we have Jane's team, the engagement awareness team, that do all of the education and the awareness raising. And then we have the newer program with, over the last couple of years, Communities for Conservation, which is really looking at sort of working together with the communities to develop diversified and resilient livelihoods, sort of incorporating opportunities for ecotourism, cultural tourism, indigenous crafts, indigenous knowledge, etc. So, and then those staff do specialize, but we do try to cross-fertilize those teams as well. And we do give other teams opportunities to join each other's activities. And in many cases, if there's a farmers workshop happening at our education center, we might need all hands on deck. So the research officers will have to help get the sort of center ready. Sometimes when we have big bush camps, all of the staff come together to help work with the kids. So they do learn each other's work, but they are sort of in specialized teams, but we encourage them to know as much about each other's work as possible.
Fantastic. I wonder if you could share also your website. I see that it's on the background behind you, but if you could share it for the audience, I think.
Yeah, it's a little blurry, unfortunately. Yes, it's www.cheetahconservationbotswana.org.
Fantastic. Let's see, I think we have still a couple minutes before we go to break. But there's a question about, there's a high mortality rate for cheetah cubs. What conservation efforts that you're doing could possibly help give the little cheetahs, the younger cheetahs, a better chance at survival?
Should I steal this one, Bex?
By all means.
give her a rest.
You go ahead. I think it's your turn.
So the mortality rate of cheetah cubs is really high in some areas of Africa. I think, they recorded in Serengeti upwards of 95%. So if you had like a maximum litter of cheetah cubs, 9 cubs in a litter is the most you'll get, maybe one of them will survive. The work that we do in Botswana, we work solely outside the protected areas. And in those areas, it's really hard for us to do sort of observational research where you can get that kind of data on sort of cub survival rates. But anecdotally, there seems to be a much better survival rate outside the protected areas because there's not a lot of lions around, not a lot of lions and not a lot of spotted hyenas. And that's one of the main causes for the cub mortality rate. So we sort of get farmers that tell us that they've seen, cheetahs with 4 or 5, sometimes 6 large cubs, 12 months old plus cubs, and we see them on the cameras as well, and it's really, you know, great to see, and amazing to see that sort of in this environment, you know, in the Kalahari semi-arid desert, but in the farming areas where we work, it's often really bushy. So not what you'd expect to be sort of prime cheetah habitats, not those open savannas that, you know, you sort of think when you think of a cheetah running really fast. And yet they've adapted well enough that they're, you know, they're surviving in fairly decent numbers. So in terms of us sort of helping, you know, in that instance, you're sort of talking about, well, you need to sort of, you know, support the coexistence of farmers and cheetahs in those non-protected areas, because the cub survival rate in those areas is quite decent. So that's really where the conservation of cheetahs is happening.
That totally makes sense. Because as you're saying, Jane, because so much of the distribution of cheetahs in Botswana is outside of the protected areas, you all are working very closely with the communities that are occupying those outside of the protected areas lands. So it's a perfect meshing. It's a great opportunity for you, that you all have to demonstrate the importance and the value of community-based conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about 80% of Botswana's cheetahs are outside the protected areas. So yeah.
Well, I'm afraid we have to move on to a break, but we're very grateful to the both of you for making this extra effort to be able to join us live here today. Jane, Rebecca, thanks for being awesome. We look forward to continuing to work with you all in the future. You're awesome collaborators.
Thank you so much, James. Great to see you. Great to be here. Enjoying all the presentations.
Absolutely. Thank you both.